Hey, so I wanted to make this video for you on Good Friday of 2019. So it's April 19th, 2019, Good Friday. It's about 6:30 in the morning. Gorgeous, cloudless, sunny day in Denver. Headed to work. Just swung by the chapel to pray. But look, you know, we had a pretty heated discussion the other night, and there was really no progress made on either end in terms of like actually understanding where the other person was coming from. So I wanted to make this video on how I think this is one technique that you can use to really authentically understand another person's position, and then you can make a judgment call in your mind of whether you agree or not with that person, and you can decide if you're going to pursue your position and try to convince that person. But you gotta remember Ben Franklin's quip, "A mind forced against its will is of the same opinion still." So you don't want to wrestle people to the ground intellectually. You want to basically, the art of negotiation or sales, or whatever you want to call it, basically trying to convince another person to do or to think in a certain way that you think is right, or to purchase a product, or just to accept your argument, is you have to learn to disagree without being disagreeable. You have to learn to disagree without being disagreeable. And you also want the person to eventually say, "That's right," not "you're right." Because if they say "you're right," they basically are saying, "Please shut up now." But if they say "that's right," it means that they believe that you understand their position. And when you can do that, then you can actually get to a point where you can move in with your sales pitch. But you have to have empathy. And you need to remember that all sales, whether you're selling somebody a product, a service, or an idea, is an information gathering process. I'll say that again, because this is something that 99.9% of people completely screw up. Sales is an information gathering process. It is not, "Let me talk you into this thing," so that even if you buy it, and this is an absolute fact, even if you come off super strong and you actually pin that person to the ground and you actually convince them to buy your thing, they will resent it. They will resent even making that purchase, and the refund rate will go through the roof because of buyer's remorse. So if you truly, authentically love someone, you will the good of the other as other, you have to take time to ask questions. Ask questions. So, in the beginning of the conversation that we had the other day, you didn't ask me anything. You basically came in and said, "Let me tell you what I think," and dropped an atom bomb, which immediately made me recognize you're not actually interested in me. You're not actually interested in what I believe. You're not interested in stopping and taking time to understand why this person is making this decision. You came in with a preconceived notion about what was right and just basically dropped that bomb on me, and it didn't go very well. Because in my mind, I'm thinking, this person doesn't care about me. All they care about is their agenda. So let me give you a couple of tactical ways, practical ways that conversation could have gone a lot better. You could have said, hey Dad, I've been wanting to talk to you about something. Okay. I'm curious to know, how is it that you came to discern that you wanted to move our family back to California? Notice I started with a how question. Also, there's empathy there. There's like, wait a minute, you actually want to know the reason why. The reason why. Another way you could approach it is, hey, I'm curious about something. What caused you to come to the conclusion that you wanted to move our family back to California? So that's a what or a how. Those are calibrated questions. Notice I did not say, why did you decide to move back to California? Because why instantly throws up a wall with the other person you're speaking to. You always want to start with a how or a why question. Then, when that person answers your how or your what, you want to shut your freaking mouth and listen until the person is completely finished. And the only thing you're going to say after you ask the what and how is, oh, I see. Tell me more. You want to use encouragers. And if you're face to face with the person, you want to look them directly in one of their eyeballs, because you can't look them both. Pick an eyeball, look them directly in the face, lean forward. Don't be rearing back in your chair with your arms folded. Lean forward, look them straight in the eye and say, oh, okay, tell me more. And you want to continue that exact loop of what and how, because the person says, if you say, how did you decide that we were going to move back to California? Not, how did you decide that you think that it was a good idea, idiot, to move us back to California? Like, no. How did you come? Like, how did you decide? How did you discern to move us back to California? If I said something like, well, you know what? That's a good question. I actually never even had peace about moving here in the first place. And you could say, really? Tell me more. That's one of the most important phrases when you're speaking to another human being. Tell me more. Or tell me about that. Or can you unpack that for me? Or can you explain more about what you're talking about? I'm curious. Tell me more. And then shut your mouth again. Because that entire process builds empathy. It actually sets up in the mind of the listener or of the person you're speaking to, this person actually gives a crap. They actually care. If you just roll in and you don't actually take the time to ask what and how questions and then say, tell me more, the other person says, this person doesn't care about me. They do not want to know what I have to say. They do not want to empathize. They do not want to take the time to actually step into my shoes and to recognize what it is that I'm actually feeling. And by the way, this technique works with girlfriends, it works with wives, it works with children, it works with selling product, it works with, because human beings want to be listened to. Human beings want to be understood. Human beings want someone else to actually stop and take time to understand them. And I promise you, 99% of people never do this, which is why there's such a lack of communication. But if you can actually stop and ask and empathize and get all the way through the what and the how questions and the tell me more, you've already done what 99% of people won't do. Then, this is the big one. This is a big one. Use mirroring. So the person, if you ask your what or how question, and you say, what was it that made you decide that we were going to move back to California? And then you take time to actually listen and you say, tell me more. Explain that. Help me understand. If you do that, and then the person is talking to you, and then you can actually follow up with, questions, or basically use mirroring to essentially say back to that person what they just said. And you do that by doing this. You either say, it sounds like, it looks like, or it seems like. It sounds like you never had peace moving to Colorado. And the other person goes, yeah, that's right. You won. You won. Or if you say, it sounds like, or it looks like, you were just never actually comfortable with making this decision. Or it seems like you had never allowed yourself to put down roots in San Diego because being from Tennessee, you could never actually consider yourself a Californian. It looks like, it sounds like, it seems like. Because if you do those things, then the other person says, this person gets me. They understand. They care. They can empathize. They can step in my shoes. It sounds like, it looks like, it seems like. And all you're doing is repeating back to the person what they just said. It's not hard. But when you do that, then the other person says, he gets me. And when the other person can say, he gets me, then and only then should you begin to unpack your position. Because here's a big aha. Once you take the time to actually understand what that other person is saying or thinking or feeling, it actually allows you to adapt your message to match what they are feeling or thinking or saying. If you come in with your sales pitch and you don't actually understand what the person is saying, thinking, or feeling, and you just roll up, there's a complete disconnect. And the other person goes, the whole time you're talking, the person's like, they don't understand. They don't get it. They don't get it. This is not resonating with me. This is not connecting with me. You have to what's called enter the conversation already taking place in the person's head. You have to take the time to enter the conversation already taking place in the person's head. Because if you can walk in and you can actually understand what's happening up here, then you can adapt your message to actually understand. And you know what? Sometimes if you really take the time to understand, the other person's like, then when you start in with your sales pitch, you're like, yeah, I don't really have anything to say. That's what you're thinking in your mind. Like, I totally didn't understand what this person was saying. I totally did not relate. I totally was freaking clueless about what this person was saying, thinking, or feeling. And then you might just shut your mouth. You might not even go in with your sales pitch. You might realize how unbelievably disconnected you were. Or you might be able to adapt your message and use the language that that person just used back to you. And you can bring up your objections and you can say things like, wow, thank you for taking the time to explain that to me. Now I think I have a much better understanding of where you're coming from. Would it be okay if I asked you a few more questions? You give that person the permission to continue the conversation because, again, all sales is an information gathering process. And that person emotionally, psychologically, physiologically may not be in a position to carry on that conversation. And if they say, you know what, I'm really smoked right now. Do you think we could pick this up over coffee tomorrow? Do you think we could pick up this conversation tomorrow and schedule a call? Or, hey, do you think that we could, I need to go take a nap. Could we talk about this later? Give that person the permission to steer the conversation, because if they don't have that permission from you, they're going to be resistant and resistive to your message. And that's not going to help your sales go up. So, to recap, you want to start any type of conversation and understand that it is an information gathering process, and you have to take time, if you actually care, to empathize with that person, to actually step in their shoes and to actually feel what they are feeling. Secondly, you want to ask a what or a how question, never a why question. And most importantly, you want to ask a freaking question. And then you want to shut your mouth and listen. A what or a how? How did you come to this conclusion? What made you decide this? Not why. Okay? Then when they answer, you want to use encouragers. Okay, I see. Tell me more. Tell me about that. Unpack that for me. And then shut your mouth. Let them talk more. And keep using those encouragers. And then you want to use mirroring. You want to mirror back to the person what they're saying with, it sounds like, it seems like, it looks like. It seems like you never really put down roots in California because you wouldn't up here allow yourself, being a dude from the South, to perceive that maybe that's where God wanted you to be. But actually, I had no peace ever in San Diego. I was constantly thinking, where am I going to go? Because I was running from Memphis. I landed in San Diego. For 5 years, I lived there. And not one time, I mean not once, did I say, this is my home. In fact, I said, California's not America. California's where a bunch of daisy-toting hippies live. California's where a bunch of artsy-fartsies are. California's where a bunch of egg-sucking, dog-liberal, gun-hating communists live. Communist California. I used to even say that, right? Because I was allowing the influence of my culture and my upbringing for all those years to greatly influence my thinking to the point that I wouldn't even allow myself to consider myself a Californian, and certainly it's not my home. And I did not understand that my children, at least the younger ones, and my wife perceived California to be their home, no longer Tennessee. Home. And I was railing against it and turned it into an enemy. And had to get away from it and had to fight it. And had to throw a dart anywhere on this great country and say, that's where I'm going to live. Because in Nebraska, they're conservative. Because in Texas, they're conservative. Debatable. In Montana, they're conservative. And you know what? 21 years after marriage, I still didn't really understand that my wife hated cold. And I don't mean just like, oh, it's cold today, I'm cold. I mean like physically has reactions to cold weather. Like hates it that much. I also didn't understand that when I get up, I just go to an office and it's nice and warm there and I just deal with myself, when she has got to put a goose down parka, a neck gaiter, a set of mittens and gloves or boots and hats and scarves just to get people from the garage to the car, or go out there and push snow off to get the 3 little kids, the 5 children 7 and under to the bus stop while I'm nice and warm and cozy and having a cup of coffee. Or when at 3 o'clock in the afternoon when everybody's home and I'm actually up here in my office It's like, okay, what are we going to do this afternoon? Because they can't go outside. Oh, yeah, they did go outside, but they went outside for 5 minutes. I didn't realize that my kids were going to miss the cultural diversity of a place like San Diego. I didn't realize that moving to Aurora was not moving to the mountains. No, skiing is not right over there. Skiing is a half a day drive back there and back. Also didn't realize, like a whole lot of other things I can unpack for you, but wait a minute. That would mean that you would have to care. So, I make this video for you, and hopefully you'll watch it, and hopefully it'll resonate with you, and you'll remember that in order to convince another human being of anything, you first have to take time to legitimately, authentically care. And not that you can do this with every single thing in your life, but I'm talking about the people that you actually care about. You have to take the time to actually sit down and ask authentic questions like what and how. Followed up by, I see, tell me more. Follow that with, it seems like, it looks like, it feels like. And repeat back to that person what you just heard to make sure you understand it correctly. And you want to actually say the words. Now, is it okay if I ask you a few more questions? Because I want to make sure that I understand exactly where you're coming from. That shows that you care. And then that person says, of course. And you say, well, I'm looking down at my notes here. Or, maybe you're not taking notes. Maybe it's not a sales pitch. But maybe you say, it seems like that you were never really at peace here. It looks like that after you got here, you realized that, there really is no perfect place to live. It feels like to me that you said, ... Or it sounds like, And then the person says, that's right. Then you can say, wow, thank you for telling me that. I now understand a lot better where you're coming from. And then the person is completely open and willing to listen to possibly your position, because they now know and believe that you understand them and care. And when another person can believe that you understand where they're coming from, you can actually empathize with them, and you actually care, that makes them 1,000,000 times more receptive to your message. And then when you start to pitch your message, you want to do it in a very non-confrontational way, because once things get confrontational in a conversation or a debate, rationality goes out the window. All of a sudden, emotion takes over, not logic. Emotion takes over. And when emotion takes over, people can get crazy. And people shut down. So, people they buy with emotion and justify with logic. So they get into your message emotionally, which is the whole setup of let's take time to actually understand this person. Let's empathize with them. And then logically, they're like, okay, he gets me. And then they're willing to listen to what you have to say. But then when you go into your sales pitch, you got to do it still in an inquisitive way. Like, do you mind if I ask you some more questions? The person's going to go, of course. You know why? Because nobody asks people questions. People just roll in with and you can just say, hey, I was wondering, how do you feel about the fact that California has a lot of drugs? A lot of, godless people. How do you feel about the fact that California has one of the highest tax rates, or the highest tax rate in the nation? How do you feel? Or what do you think about the fact that the Bishop of Denver is unbelievably orthodox and the Bishop of San Diego is, well, and just keep unpacking it with questions and allow the other person to explain. And you can bring up every single one of your objections in the form of a question. Because ultimately, salesmanship is allowing the other person to come to a conclusion that you want them to come to. It's disagreeing without being disagreeable. It's taking that person by the hand and taking them down a yellow brick road and allowing them to come to the conclusion that you want them to come to. That, my friend, that is true salesmanship. Authenticity. I love you.